The dusty cowboy rode into town alone for supplies, but stopped dead when he spotted the black bride with dangerous curves standing abandoned outside the church, her wedding dress now a symbol of public shame. Townspeople whisper and point at the mail-order mistake, assuming she's just another failed arrangement destined for the next wagon out of town. The woman maintains perfect composure, despite their cruel stares, suggesting hidden strength beneath her vulnerable situation. The weathered cowboy observes from his saddle, recognizing something familiar in her quiet dignity, a resilience that mirrors his own guarded nature. What neither realizes is that her abandoned groom's disappearance and his secret territorial mission are connected by a web of corruption that has already claimed lives. Will this chance encounter between two outcasts expose the dangerous truth? Or will they both become the next victims of a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of power? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. 3 days earlier, Winona Renfro had stepped off the dusty stagecoach in Millbrook Valley, wearing her finest blue dress and carrying a worn leather satchel. The telegram in her pocket promised a new husband and a fresh start. Instead, she found an empty church and curious stares from the townspeople. She waited at the boarding house. Hours turned to days. Her supposed groom never appeared. The whispers started immediately. Women pulled their children closer when she passed. Men looked through her as if she were invisible. The boarding house owner, Mrs. Caldwell, grew colder with each passing meal. By the third morning, patience had run thin throughout the town. Winona smoothed her wedding dress one final time and walked toward the general store. She needed supplies for the journey home, though she had little money left. The morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street as she pushed open the wooden door. The store fell silent. 3 women near the fabric display turned their backs. 2 men by the counter stopped their conversation mid-sentence. Store owner Bennett looked up from his ledger. His expression soured instantly. "We don't extend credit to your kind." Winona placed 3 silver coins on the counter. "I have money."
"You're welcome. Time to move along." "I've done nothing wrong. Vagrancy is against town ordinances. Next stage leaves in 2 hours." A small crowd had gathered on the wooden sidewalk. Their faces showed a mixture of curiosity and contempt. Some nodded approval at Hayes' words. "She's been nothing but trouble since she arrived," Bennett called from his doorway. "Probably stole that dress," another voice added. Winona felt the familiar sting of assumptions and accusations. These people saw only what they expected to see. A failed mail-order bride, a woman without prospects or protection, someone to be discarded and forgotten. But they were wrong about almost everything. From across the street, a tall figure watched the scene unfold. Jedediah McAllister sat astride his chestnut mare, studying the confrontation with careful eyes. He had ridden into town an hour earlier, seeking basic supplies for his journey north. Instead, he found himself witness to casual cruelty. The woman in the wedding dress intrigued him. She faced the hostile crowd without flinching. Her posture remained straight, despite the verbal attacks. Most people would have broken under such public humiliation. Jed had seen similar strength before. In soldiers who refused to retreat. In settlers who survived impossible winters. In anyone who had learned that dignity was sometimes all you could control. Hayes stepped closer to the woman. "I said it's time to go. I'll leave when I'm ready." The deputy's hand moved toward his weapon. The crowd pressed closer, sensing potential drama. Jed recognized the dangerous shift in mood. He dismounted and crossed the street. "Is there a problem here?" Hayes turned, sizing up the newcomer. Jed stood several inches taller and carried himself with quiet confidence. His clothes were travel-worn, but well-maintained. A Colt revolver hung at his hip. "No problem, stranger. Just helping this lady understand local customs." Jed looked at Winona. Her dark eyes met his steadily. No tears, no pleading, just calm assessment of a difficult situation. "The lady appears to understand decision. I accept your offer." She gathered her skirts and walked toward Jed's horse. The crowd parted reluctantly. Hayes looked ready to object further, but something in Jed's steady gaze changed his mind. "Don't expect to be welcome back here," the deputy called after them. Jed helped Winona onto his horse and swung up behind her. As they rode toward the edge of town, she felt eyes boring into her back. Let them stare. She had endured worse and survived. What she didn't know was that her mysterious rescuer carried federal documents in his saddlebags, documents related to territorial corruption and missing military supplies. The same corruption that had cost her brother Marcus his life 6 months earlier. The same corruption that Deputy Hayes was desperately trying to keep hidden. They rode in silence for the first mile. Winona sat stiffly in front of Jed, acutely aware of his presence behind her. The horse's steady rhythm gradually eased the tension in her shoulders. "There's a creek ahead," Jed said finally. "Good place to rest and talk." Winona nodded. She had questions that needed answers before this arrangement went any further. The creek ran clear and cold through a grove of cottonwoods. Jed dismounted first, then helped Winona down. She smoothed her wedding dress and looked around the peaceful setting. Such a contrast to the hostile faces they had left behind. "You didn't have to help me back there." Jed loosened his horse's saddle. "Didn't like the odds. 5 against 1 never bothered men before. You weren't backing down. That made the difference." Winona studied his weathered face. Mid-30s, she guessed. Lines around his eyes suggested someone who spent long hours scanning horizons. His movements were careful and deliberate. "What do you really want from me?" "Told you already. Company on the trail. Men don't rescue strange women without expecting something in return." Jed met her gaze directly. "Some men don't. I'm not some men." Something in his tone convinced her. She had learned to read people quickly during her years of teaching. Survival had depended on cavalry. Good man, smart, asked the right questions. Asked questions about what? Supply shipments that never arrived. Equipment that disappeared from warehouses. Money that went missing from regiment funds. Jed's expression grew more serious. What happened to him? Official report says he fell from his horse during night patrol. Broke his neck. Winona's voice hardened. Marcus was the best rider in his unit. He didn't fall. You think someone killed him? I know someone killed him. He wrote letters describing what he'd discovered. Used codes we learned as children. You still have these letters? Winona patted her leather satchel. Every one. Plus notes he hid in our old family Bible. Jed sat down on a fallen log, processing this information. That's why you came to Millbrook Valley. The last letter mentioned this town. Something about corrupt officials and missing supplies. I used the mail-order bride story to travel safely and investigate. Dangerous plan for a woman alone, Safer than announcing I was Marcus Renfro's sister, asking questions about his death. Jed nodded slowly. The pieces fit together now. Her composure under pressure, her careful observation of the townspeople, the way Deputy Hayes had seemed particularly eager to get rid of her. You think Hayes is involved? His reaction was too strong, too personal. Men don't get that hostile unless they're protecting something. What exactly are you hoping to find? Winona opened her satchel and pulled out a small bundle of letters. Marcus wrote about a network. Military officers, territorial officials, local businessmen, all working together to steal supplies and sell them privately. Big operation. Big enough to kill for. She handed him one of the letters. Can you read this? Jed studied the seemingly innocent family correspondence. Looks normal to me. Every third word in the second paragraph. Skip the connecting words. Jed's finger traced the text carefully. Supply, theft, Hayes Bennett, territorial, governor. Marcus was built missing. Winona stood and paced to the creek's edge. The water rushed over smooth stones, carrying away debris and leaving the stream bed clean. She wished justice worked the same way. If we worked together, we might actually expose them. Might. Or we might end up like Marcus. That's a risk I'm willing to take. Jed studied her determined expression. Why? Why risk your life for this? Because Marcus died trying to protect people. Because good soldiers deserve better than unmarked graves. Because someone needs to speak for those who can't speak for themselves. And if we succeed, then maybe other Marcus Renfros will live to come home to their families. Jed made his decision. Partner. Winona smiled for the first time since arriving in Millbrook Valley. Partner. They returned to Millbrook Valley the next morning as Brother Jedediah and Sister Winona, traveling missionaries, seeking to establish a school for Army children. The disguise had been Winona's idea. People talked freely around religious folk, assuming them harmless. Winona had traded her wedding dress for a simple brown traveling outfit. A white bonnet covered her hair. She carried a worn Bible and spoke softly about education and moral guidance. The transformation was remarkable. Jed wore his cleanest shirt and carried himself with the humble dignity of a frontier preacher. His gun remained hidden beneath his coat. They made a convincing pair. Their first stop was the boarding house. Mrs. Caldwell greeted them with suspicious politeness. We don't usually accommodate your sort together. Sister Winona is my cousin, Jed explained smoothly. We're establishing schools throughout the territory. Money changed hands. Mrs. Caldwell's attitude softened considerably. The Army base might be interested in your services. Lots of families there. We'd be grateful for an introduction. Within hours, their cover story had spread through town. The hostile looks toward Winona lessened slightly. A missionary's cousin deserved basic courtesy, even if grudgingly given. That afternoon, they visited Fort Collins. Wanted to understand, Winona said softly. Helps with the grieving process. His sister should know Marcus died, doing his duty. They left the fort with more questions than answers. Morrison's story sounded rehearsed, too neat, too convenient. That evening, they walked through the town cemetery. Winona found Marcus's grave in the military section. The headstone was simple. Name, rank, dates.
Nothing about his character or sacrifice. "He deserves better," she whispered. Jed placed a hand on her shoulder. "He'll get it." A voice spoke from behind them. "You folks knew Marcus?" They turned to see an elderly black woman carrying fresh wildflowers. Her face showed the deep lines of hard-earned wisdom. "I'm Ruth Washington. My son serves with the 10th Cavalry." "We're missionaries," Jed explained. "His family asked us to pay respects." Ruth studied them carefully. Marcus was a good man, asked the right questions. "What kind of questions?" Ruth glanced around nervously. "The kind that get folks in trouble." "We're here to help his family understand what happened." "Can't talk here. Too many ears. Meet me at the old church ruins tomorrow after sunset." She placed her flowers on Marcus's grave and disappeared into the gathering dusk. The abandoned church sat on a hill overlooking town. Weeds grew through cracks in the foundation. Broken windows stared like empty eyes. Ruth waited in the shadows, her son beside her. "This is James," she said. "He rode with Marcus." James was young, maybe 20, with intelligent eyes and calloused hands. He kept glancing toward town as if expecting trouble. "Marcus was gathering evidence," James said quietly. "Supply theft. Someone selling military equipment to private buyers." "Who was involved?" "Started noticing things in the warehouse. Shipments that arrived but disappeared from inventory. Equipment marked as damaged when it was perfectly good." "Did Marcus keep records?" "Smart man. Documented everything. Times, dates, quantities." Winona felt excitement building. "Where are these records?" "Hidden." Mark's sister Winona's resemblance to someone he couldn't quite place. "We need to find that line shack today," Jed said as they prepared to leave town. "Too risky. Hayes might follow us." "More risky to wait. He's getting suspicious." They left town separately. Winona took the main road north while Jed circled around through the hills. They met at Copper Creek an hour later. The line shack was small and weathered. Inside, dust covered everything except one corner where someone had clearly spent time recently. A loose floorboard revealed Marcus's hiding place. The documents were wrapped in oiled cloth. Supply manifests with discrepancies marked in red ink. Letters between corrupt officials. Financial records showing payments to private accounts. "This is it," Winona breathed. "Proof of everything." Jed studied the papers carefully. Names he recognized from his own investigation. Amounts that matched missing federal funds. Your brother was thorough. Thorough enough to get himself killed. A sound outside froze them both. Horses approaching. Multiple riders. Jed moved to the window. Hayes and 3 others were trapped. Winona gathered the documents quickly. "Back window?" "Too exposed. They'll see us." The riders stopped outside. Hayes's voice carried clearly. "Check inside. They've got to be here somewhere." Jed pointed to a loose board in the back wall. They squeezed through the gap just as boots stomped onto the front porch. The documents pressed against Winona's chest as they crawled through tall grass toward the creek. Hayes's voice carried from inside the shack. "Someone's been here recently." Fresh tracks outside. "Check the floorboards," another voice ordered. They reached the creek bank as shouts erupted behind them. Hayes had found the hiding place. The empty hiding place. "Find them!" Hayes roared. "They can't have gone far." Jed and Winona waded downstream, using the water to mask their tracks. The current tugged at Winona's skirts. Cold water soaked through her boots. Behind them, horses crashed through underbrush. A mile downstream, they climbed out near a rocky outcropping. Jed's horse waited where he had tethered it that morning. They mounted quickly and rode the right authorities when the corruption goes this high. Jed pulled his own documents from his saddlebag. The federal seal caught the candlelight. These might help. Winona looked closer at papers she had never examined carefully. Official letterhead, government stamps. Authorization for territorial investigation. What exactly do these say? That I'm authorized to investigate irregularities in territorial administration. You're not just carrying documents. You're a federal agent. Jed met her eyes steadily. Federal marshal. Undercover assignment. The revelation hit her like cold water. How long have you known about the corruption? 6 months, since reports started reaching Washington about missing supplies and suspicious deaths. Marcus's death, among others. Your brother wasn't the first soldier to die asking the wrong questions. Winona felt anger building alongside relief. You've known all along what happened to him. Suspected. Couldn't prove it. That's why I'm here. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Needed to be sure you were who you claimed to be. Needed to verify your evidence. And now? Now we have enough proof to expose the entire network. A sound outside interrupted them. Horses approaching in darkness. Jed blew out the candle and moved to the window. 4 riders, coming up the main trail. Hayes? Can't tell yet. The riders stopped 50 yards away. A voice called out across the darkness. We know you're in there. Come out with your hands visible. Jed recognized Hayes's voice. Back door. Move quietly. They gathered their belongings and crept toward the rear of the cabin. Moonlight revealed more riders surrounding the building. Hayes had brought enough men to cover all exits. You're surrounded, Hayes shouted. No point running anymore. Jed checked his revolver. 6 shots against 8 men. Poor odds even with surprise on his side. Federal Marshal, he called out. I'm ordering you to stand down. Laughter echoed from multiple directions. No federal marshals out here, friend. Just thieves and troublemakers. Check my saddlebags. Authorization papers from Washington. Papers can be forged. Evidence can be planted. Winona understood the trap they faced. Hayes would claim they were criminals carrying false documents. Dead criminals couldn't contradict his. They'll see us. Not if we create a distraction. What kind of distraction? Jed pointed to an oil lamp on the table. Mining camps burn easily. Winona nodded understanding. They gathered the most critical documents and prepared to run. Jed lit the lamp and threw it against the front wall. Flames spread quickly across dry wooden planks. Shouts erupted from the surrounding riders. Fire! They're burning evidence. In the confusion, Jed and Winona slipped out the back door. Gunshots cracked behind them as they sprinted toward the creek. Bullets whined overhead. They reached the water as the cabin became a torch lighting the entire hillside. The current carried them downstream while Hayes and his men fought the spreading fire. A mile later, they crawled onto the opposite bank. Behind them, orange flames painted the sky. Smoke billowed into the starlit darkness. Where do we go now? Winona asked. Denver, Federal Courthouse. That's a week's ride. Hayes will have the whole territory looking for us. Then we avoid towns and stay off main trails. Winona looked back at the burning hillside. Everything had changed in one night. No more disguises. No more investigation. Now they were fugitives, carrying evidence that powerful men would kill to suppress. Will anyone believe us? They'll believe the documents. Your brother documented everything perfectly. If we live long enough to present them. Jed helped her to her feet. We'll live. Your brother didn't gather this evidence just to have it buried with us.
They walked through darkness toward an uncertain future, carrying proof of corruption and the weight of justice on their shoulders. They spent 3 days hiding in mountain caves, moving only at night. Jed's horse carried them along forgotten mining trails, while wanted posters spread through every town below. Hayes had painted them as dangerous criminals who had murdered a federal officer and stolen military secrets. The lies burned in Winona's chest, but she understood their power. Few people questioned if questions. Why Hayes was so eager to get rid of the lady before she could talk to anyone. Why he knew exactly where to find you at the mining camp. Ruth stepped closer. Captain Morrison's getting nervous too. Been asking his sergeants about missing supplies. Word is spreading through the fort. Winona felt a spark of hope. The truth is coming out. Slowly, James warned, but Hayes still has official authority. Still has men with guns. We have something better, Jed said. He pulled out his federal documents. These prove I'm a legitimate marshal investigating territorial corruption. James studied the papers carefully. These look official. They are official. Washington sent me here 6 months ago. Ruth's eyes widened. You mean the government knows about the corruption? Suspects it. These documents prove it. Then why are you running? Why not arrest Hayes yourself? 1 marshal against 8 corrupt lawmen? I need backup from Denver. How long to get help? 2 weeks if I ride hard. James shook his head. Hayes won't wait 2 weeks. He's getting desperate. Talking about burning down the old church where folks have been meeting. What meetings? Families asking questions about their dead soldiers. Merchants complaining about missing supplies. People are starting to organize. Winona realized what was happening. He's going to silence the witnesses. Can't let that happen, Jed said grimly. What choice do we have? We're outnumbered and outgunned. Maybe not outgunned, James said thoughtfully. Got friends at the fort. Soldiers who know something's wrong. Soldiers can't act against civilian authorities without orders. What about unofficial help? Men acting on their own time? Jed considered this. His mission was to gather evidence, not start a war. But circumstances had changed. Innocent people faced danger because of their investigation. How many soldiers would help? Maybe we do it right. Not if we have enough witnesses. Winona understood his thinking. A public meeting. Too many people for Hayes to control. Sunday service at the main church, Ruth suggested. Whole town attends. Hayes won't let us near that church. What about the old church ruins? People have been gathering there anyway. James nodded. Sunday evening. Tell folks we have information about the missing supplies and dead soldiers. Hayes will try to stop it. Let him try. In front of the whole community. They spent the rest of the day planning. James and Ruth would spread word carefully among trusted families. Jed would position himself where he could protect Winona during her presentation. The soldiers would provide unofficial security. As evening approached, Winona felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Tomorrow would determine whether Marcus's sacrifice led to justice or more bloodshed. You sure about this? Jed asked as they prepared to descend toward town.
Marcus died gathering this evidence. Ruth's son and other soldiers are at risk. People deserve to know the truth. Hayes won't give up easily. Then we'll have to be stronger than he is. They rode down the mountain as darkness gathered around them. Behind them lay 3 days of hiding and running. Ahead waited a confrontation that would determine the future of everyone Hayes had threatened or silenced. Winona touched the documents pressed against her chest. Her brother's careful handwriting. Jed's federal authorization. The governor's panicked telegram. Truth had power if people were brave enough to hear it. Tomorrow they would find out if courage could triumph over corruption. If justice could emerge from the shadows where honest men had died asking the right questions. The lights of Millbrook Valley flickered below them like stars fallen to earth. Soon those lights would illuminate either victory or defeat. Sunday evening brought nearly the entire town to the old church ruins. Families arrived carrying lanterns and chairs. Soldiers came in civilian clothes. Even merchants who had avoided taking sides showed up out of curiosity. Winona stood near the broken altar, her heart pounding as she watched the crowd grow. Word had spread faster than James had expected. People were hungry for answers about Hayes? Fugitives trying to spread lies about military operations. What fugitives? Jed stepped into the lantern light, his federal documents visible in his hands. Federal Marshal Jedediah McAllister, I'm here on official business. Hayes drew his weapon. That man is wanted for murder and theft. Check the papers, Morrison ordered. Let me see those documents. Morrison studied Jed's authorization carefully. His expression grew serious as he read the official seals and signatures. These appear genuine. Federal investigation into territorial corruption. Papers can be forged. These weren't forged. Morrison looked up at the crowd. This man has legitimate federal authority. The crowd stirred. Hayes's story was falling apart before their eyes. Winona stepped forward. I have evidence about the corruption that killed my brother Marcus Renfro. Your brother was a thief and a troublemaker. My brother was a Buffalo soldier who died protecting military supplies from thieves. She pulled out Marcus's letters and began reading. Supply manifests with altered quantities. Financial records showing payments to private accounts. Correspondence between corrupt officials planning their schemes. The crowd listened in growing silence. The evidence was methodical and damning. James Washington stood up. I served with Marcus. Every word she's saying is true. Other soldiers began standing. One by one, they confirmed details from Winona's evidence. Missing equipment they had noticed. Questions they had been ordered not to ask. Threats they had received for being too curious. Hayes looked increasingly desperate. These are lies designed to undermine military discipline. Then explain this, Winona said, holding up the telegram from the governor's office. She read it aloud, including the orders to cease investigations and transfer problematic personnel. Morrison's face darkened as he heard his commanding officer's words. I was never informed of any governor's directive. Because you weren't part of the conspiracy, Jed said. The corruption required keeping honest officers in the dark. Store owner Bennett pushed toward the front. Now hold on. Are you saying the governor himself is involved? The evidence speaks for itself, between Hayes and the crowd. If Marshal McAllister is here on federal business, this falls under military jurisdiction. You can't interfere with civilian law enforcement. I can when civilian law enforcement threatens a federal investigation. The standoff stretched taut. Hayes had 6 men with guns. Morrison had authority but no soldiers present. The crowd had truth but no weapons. Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Caldwell, the boarding house owner, stood up. I want to hear the rest of the evidence. Other voices joined hers. People who had remained silent began demanding answers. The momentum shifted as community members chose truth over fear. Hayes realized he had lost control of the situation. "This isn't over." "Yes, it is," Morrison said firmly. "I'm placing you under military arrest pending investigation of these charges. You have no authority over me." "I have authority over theft of military supplies. That makes this a military matter." Morrison nodded to the soldiers in the crowd. They moved to surround Hayes and his deputies. Outnumbered and facing hostile witnesses, the corrupt lawmen surrendered their weapons. Over the following weeks, federal investigators arrived from Denver. Winona's evidence provided the foundation for prosecutions that reached the territorial governor's office. Marcus's hidden documents proved systematic corruption involving dozens of officials. Captain Morrison personally led the investigation at Fort Collins. Hayes and his co-conspirators faced federal charges for theft, conspiracy, and murder. The trials drew attention from newspapers across the territory. Winona testified at each proceeding, her calm dignity and thorough preparation impressing judges and juries. She had transformed from dismissed mail-order bride to respected advocate for military families. The territorial government established new oversight procedures for military supplies. Marcus Renfro received posthumous honors as a soldier who died protecting federal property. His grave got a new headstone, listing his service record and commendations. 6 months after that evening at the church ruins, Winona and Jed were married in the same location. The ceremony drew families from across the territory, including many whose loved ones had been vindicated by their investigation. Ruth Washington served as matron of honor. James gave away the bride. Fear and justice had emerged from the shadows where honest soldiers had died asking the right questions.